All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. I'm very happy to welcome my fourth member of Adrenalin O.D. To this podcast. And we also have a band in common, so we have much to talk about.
Oh,
It's my pleasure to
yes, we do.
welcome Mr. Jim Foster. Jim, good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see you, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. So yeah, you were a part of two bands with some pretty considerable histories. So I don't
Yeah,
think we'll run out of things that we could talk about in this conversation. But I figure we'll kind of start at the very beginning of things for you.
sure.
I know you were obviously part of the original Adrenaline OD lineup, so that
Right.
puts you out playing with them 81-ish for sure.
Yes, 81. Yeah.
When did music and particularly guitar first become a big part of your life?
Hmm. It's kind of funny in that I was in the school band and I played saxophone, and my older sister was in the band as well. And then when I got to high school, I was like, I don't want to hang out with these band people. I want to hang out with rock people. So I went and told my parents, I said, I don't want to play saxophone anymore. I want a guitar. So they sold the nice saxophone, and I think I got paid $100 for some Epiphone. I don't even remember the model. And that's where it started. So I would have been about 14, 15 then. But then I'd kind of play and then I wouldn't play and then I'd play and I wouldn't play. And it was about when I hit 17, 18, I started to get more serious about it. So,
And what were you listening to in those days for inspiration?
oh gosh. It's funny because, as they've said, I'm a little older than the other AOD guys. So uh, Black Sabbath was a huge for me. Uh, that kind of peak period Rolling Stones was big for me as well. The Stooges was big. I was introduced to the Stooges at like 12
Mm.
years old by there was this family in Madison that was the mom was a music teacher, and they were called, the name of the family was the Roots, and the youngest Root brother comes to the AOD reunions, Tom Root. But my friend was the Jim Root, the second brother, and then the oldest brother, Roy, was way ahead of his time. He looked like he was long hair, sideburns. He looked like he was a member of like the Stooges or the Alice Cooper group. And they introduced me to the Stooges, the MC5, the New York Dolls, which funny enough, I didn't really like at the time. I thought the Stooges were way better. So it's kind of a funny thing. So, but I think about it and I remember my friend bringing the record into our middle school. And every Friday, the music teacher used to let us bring records in and play them. And he put on No Fun. And I just remember, wow, this is like not progressive rock. This is really, really simple. And then the whole line of, maybe stay out, maybe call home, no, maybe go home, maybe call mom on the telephone. I was like, wow, no hippie would say that. That would be so cool. But he's acknowledging that, you know, there's nothing to do. He's bored. Maybe he still has a good relationship with his mom, so maybe he'll call his mom. It just struck me in some way as kind of like, wow, these guys are like me. I'm a young teenager and I'm bored out of my mind. At this point, it was in sometime in the 70s, and I was not. I thought the whole hippie thing was kind of a little ridiculous, and I just kind of liked the Stooges' viewpoint because they seem to be not hippies, just like the Alice Cooper band did not seem to be hippies at all.
Yeah, definitely. So was AOD the first band that you were in that was out
No,
shows?
no. It's interesting. I had this band that was kind of just post high school with my high school friend Kevin, who played drums, and Doug L, who was my friend Jeff L's older brother. He was like my sister's age. And we had a band. It was just the three of us. We never played live. We called ourselves the Twisted Fucks. And, we would play like Ramones songs and Sex Pistols songs and maybe like, I don't know, like an Elvis Costello cover or something. I don't know. And then after that, I had an unnamed band with Dave Jones, I believe his name was. And he ended up, I think, for a while in Agnostic Front.
Right, right. Mhm.
Yeah, and it was just the two of us here in Madison. Well, I'm not in Madison now, but in Madison. And it's kind of interesting because at the time, we, there were no DC or there were no thrash records out. This is 1980. Yet we were playing thrash beats. So it's kind of like, it's interesting to me how something can develop that's the same, just kind of like, the Ramones and the Saints developed a similar thing without having any knowledge of each other. It was just what was happening at the time. And that was kind of like with us. I have the tape somewhere. I should try to find them, but it was just, it was that polka beat going with me playing over the top of it. And he would sometimes sing a little bit while he was drumming. So,
Oh.
and that was sometime early 1980. And then we kind of just stopped playing with each other. And then, AOD was shortly after that.
And they found you through the Aquarian. Is that right?
I found them. So they posted the ad, and yeah, I went over to Dave's house. Paul pulled his Yamaha solid state black with the plastic front grill out of the trunk of his car. I got my distortion pedal. We went in their den. I plugged in, and I could see right away they were trying to play it cool, but the two of them looked at each other like, okay, we got the person we need. And I could see it right away. I'm like, oh, these guys seem cool. We liked all the same things. We, had a, oh, do you like the Washington, D.C. stuff? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you like the L.A. stuff? Yes. Or do you want to stick with the old punk rock thing? Or are you really into the hardcore thing? Oh, no, no, no. I like those bands, but I'm into the hardcore thing. So.
And speaking of the hardcore thing, AOD obviously was pretty damn ground floor for a lot of that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I joke with Jack all the time, and I say we were the originators in New Jersey, and I joke with him. I said this should be like a mob thing at this point. We should be getting paid tribute.
No kidding. And I'm sure you've seen the other interviews I did with the
Yeah,
other guys, and looking at that era, let's take the Bowery, for example, which is
sure.
not what it was. I mean, what it is today is not what it was in the 90s. And I wasn't there in the 80s, but I would imagine it's nothing compared to what it was back then. Um, Paint a picture for me of being in a band, getting to that part of the city, playing like A7 in the middle of
Hmm.
the night. I mean, what was that environment like for you, kind of going from Jersey to playing basically, Jabba's Palace to a hardcore show?
Well, it's interesting because I don't know why, but I never had any fear to go to like A7 or to go to, CBGBs. Like in, I don't know, 1981, 1982, I went to some party in somebody's redone apartment on Avenue B, at nighttime. And, some of the surrounding buildings were still, they were dealing drugs out of them. And it's funny, I never had any issue there. And then I barely got out of being mugged a couple blocks from Max's Kansas City in that parking lot. I don't think it's there anymore, at the northern part of Union Square Park. I was parking there to go into Max's, or I was coming back out. coming to my car, and like one guy was on another side, and somehow I just talked my way out of it. But that was the closest I came. And what's no, actually, it was when I was going there, and this is what's ironic, and I should mention this, is that I get online, and I'm kind of a little shaken by the whole thing. So I get online, and the guys in front of me are, they're from Jersey too, waiting online to see Walter Lore play. It was one of his post Heartbreakers bands with Billy Rath. It was either before it was the Waldos, it was the Superheroes or the Heroes. So he was playing, and there's these guys in front of me in line. I'm like, well, maybe I'm going to stick close to these guys because I'm like a little freaked out that I almost got mugged. So then I'm hanging out with them a little bit. And then a year later, I go into the AOD first rehearsal, and Jack is there. I said, I know you. And we had met at Max's that time. And this is like 1980. And I met Tommy, Bruce, and Jack waiting online to go in to see the Walter Lore.
Hmm.
So, and they were kids. They were like, I don't know, 17, 16.
Yeah, I mean, New York, even in the 90s when I was touching base a lot there, and we'll get into that with the EF stuff.
Right.
I mean, there were some dodgy moments for me, even
Yeah.
going there to play CBGBs or the wetlands or what have you. It wasn't a tidy place. Now it's ridiculously tidy, but
I don't even recognize it. If I drive in there, I all my landmarks are gone. I'm like, my friend, a friend's band played at Bowery Electric, and we were walking down the street. He goes, "Oh," he says, "come into this courtyard." And I went, "Why are we going into this courtyard?" So we go into this courtyard. He goes, "Do you recognize this?" I said, "No." He says, "This is that back part, that lot that was behind CBGB's." And I looked around, I said, "Huh?" Where, if you'd open the door and go out there, like the homeless people would be like, "Get back inside, get out of here. This is our area."
Yeah, it's nuts. They have that place on the Bowery now, that Jesse Malin runs, the Bowery Electric.
Right.
And it's cool. They have my buddy Drew Stone does Sunday matinee shows there. He puts them on.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I went to one of them the first time I went. I went to what is now the Varvatos fashion store. That used to be CBGB's.
Right.
And it sucked. And then I kept walking towards where the club is, and I'm like, what the hell happened to New York? But then
Right.
past the freaking ATM that's sitting on the Bowery now, there sat Johnny Stiff on the stoop. And I'm like, okay, I am in the right place after all. So thank you, Johnny Stiff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's different days for sure.
Right.
But as I've talked to the other guys in AOD, the sound of the band in that era obviously defined what became a lot of hardcore from that point. Um, just the speed of what you guys were playing was
Mm.
intense. I mean, you mentioned the Stooges, you mentioned the Dolls, and then you go from that to like the Let's Barbecue record. It's
Right.
like an aircraft carrier taking off. I mean, for you
Yeah.
as a guitarist, I mean, when you first began playing in that style, because you're not faking it, you're
No. No.
going for
No.
a guitar. I mean, was it challenging, or was it something that came
No.
very naturally?
No. No. I think being, very young, and it's interesting because I had learned to play along to the Ramones' first album, all downstrokes. Okay. And so then Paul's writing style was more this blur of really fast up and down strokes. And so Paul goes, "Well, this is kind of like what we're doing." And I just went, "Oh." And I just shrugged and went, "Okay." So I basically adopted Paul's style and started writing songs, like Suburbia, Trans Am, stuff like that, in the style that he had kind of said, "This is what we're going to do." And I thought, well, it's kind of these two guys, and I'm coming into what they're setting up. So yeah, okay, fine. Sure, that's what we'll do. And then I was kind of like started to introduce the fast slow thing, which kind of, there were other bands doing it, and it's basically based off of the Sabbath template
Mhm.
entirely. And then later on I realized the way I was doing some of the chords, where I take the chord like this, the bar chord, and I would kind of go like this, and vibrato on the whole chord. And I was always like, why do I do that? That's total Tony Iommi.
Mm.
And he did that because there was just one guitar in the band, and he wanted to make the band sound bigger. So instead of just playing a straight bar chord, he would kind of go like, that type of sound where it kind of had some vibrato to it. So, like I said, he was a very, very big influence.
Mm.
Him and Johnny Thunders. So
And to that point, one thing that is definitely worth acknowledging with AOD, um, you guys could play. There was a musicality in that band. I think the early hardcore stuff gets sometimes dismissed by people as kind of amateurish and just fast and sloppy. But look at the Bad Brains. Look at what you guys were
well,
doing. I mean,
they were they were really good players.
yeah. But even your reference points, what you're talking about, you weren't
Mm-hmm.
just picking up a guitar and just kind of bashing away. There was some
Right.
sense of making the songs sound like songs, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Paul and I did a lot of getting together at each other's house and working on things. And it's really interesting because I had Suburbia ready, and he just went, no. I said, what do you mean, no? He goes, you're putting the accent of the song on the turnaround and not on the dun, 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 the melodic part. And I went, oh. And then he goes, here, look. And I handed my guitar to him. I went, oh, yeah, that's better. So, he was a really good working partner in that way. And the other good thing about him is that I could just suggest ideas. And then a week or two later, he'd come into practice with lyrics written. Like I said to him, we get all this shit in New York about being from New Jersey. We decided we're not going to say we're from New York. We're a New Jersey band, but you should write a song about like New Jersey, about the suburbs. And I said, about how it's boring and going to the Livingston Mall and there's like nothing there. And then, yeah, he comes back and he's got the song written. Trans Am came out of us coming down from practice up in Second City Studios or Zounds. It was either Saddlebrook or Elmwood Park, driving down the parkway and seeing someone driving a Trans Am and then just riffing on Trans Ams and joking about it. And yeah, this person had the Playboy Bunny air freshener hanging down. And we were just riffing and riffing and riffing on Trans Ams. And then, like a week later, he comes in. He goes, oh, I wrote a song about Trans Ams. I said, huh? And he goes, remember the Trans Am we saw? I says, yeah. He goes, well, I wrote a song about it. And then the fact that it wasn't sung, it was like a spoken word thing. And I would just remember thinking, I don't know if this is like ridiculous or great, but it worked, you know.
Definitely. One critical thing that happened, amongst other critical things during your original tenure in AOD was the band's inclusion on New York Thrash, you know,
Mm-hmm.
which was obviously a pinnacle release, not just for you guys, but the Undead's first recording was on that.
Mm-hmm.
Beastie Boys were on that.
Mm-hmm.
False Prophets,
Mm-hmm.
just tons of great stuff. How would you say having AOD part of that impacted the band, especially in New York?
Um, I guess, yeah, it's funny because I know people think that there was a big impact. I think a bigger impact for us was Jack Rabbit and Tim Summers' support.
Hmm.
And, I'll always be grateful to them because, we were nobodies. And, we had been together just a short time. And we brought down a demo tape that probably contained some of the two songs that ended up on New York Thrash, but it had, other material. And they just started playing it on their show. And, and that show had a lot of clout, more than some of the other college radio shows around. Pat Duncan was another one that really helped out. So that kind of got the word out. I think Pat's show started in '82. I'm not sure. I don't remember, but I don't remember if they were concurrent to two shows or not. But I know that, Jack Rabbit and Tim Summer, with their clout, that right away we started getting good shows. And it's kind of interesting in that both AOD and Electric Frankenstein, I was kind of spoiled because we got good shows right away, like right off the bat. I mean, so much so that when I would try to do other shows, other bands, and if we did any more than 2 or 3 shows, and it was just like playing to 3 drunks, I'd be like, I don't want to do this, because I was completely spoiled by the fact that we had these good shows right off the bat.
Looking back now, what are your thoughts on Let's Barbecue as a representation of the band at that point in time? Do you think it was captured?
No. I've never been happy with the production. I think with today's mastering technology, if there's some kind of, nobody seems to be 100% sure where the multi-tracks are. If we could get those multi-tracks back and mix it with today's technology and then master it with today's technology, I think it would sound a lot better, because that record, compared to how powerful the band was, it just doesn't catch it. I mean, that being said, when I would go and see the Misfits, I don't feel like the records captured, I mean, they were an incredibly powerful band. I mean, I felt bad for Glenn because, I went to one show and they were playing, Doyle and Jerry were playing so loud that I took my head and put my ear up against the floor monitor in front of Glenn. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear any Glenn. I mean, I don't know what that did for my hearing, but I always felt bad for him because I was like, what's he supposed to do here? I mean, I don't know if other people have relayed this, but they did a show in Jersey City at the Pias Club, and I was leaning against the stage in front of Doyle, and he hit the first chord, and I felt searing pain go into my ear, which means he was above the threshold of pain. He was above 130 decibels. The only thing I've heard louder than that was a Motorhead show I went to, and that was just like sticking your head in a jet engine. But I was just kind of like, what, this is a great band, but isn't it kind of like a showcase for Glenn's voice and lyrics and arrangements, and kind of like, what's going on here? And it's kind of funny. I know we're going off a little bit of a tangent, but Glenn used to come into Sal's shop, Rebel Rouser, and he was very approachable, and he used to go to tons of different small gigs. You used to see kind of Doyle and Jerry more at the bigger shows, but Glenn was pretty much all in, And I can remember he would, kind of talk about, he was just not into it as much as he used to be with the band. And then, but it was funny because, with Earth AD, and I had heard some of that, I thought, they're on the cusp of something here. Because I was kind of foreseeing this whole metal punk crossover. And while at the time I couldn't see them as an arena band, I totally could have seen them on tour with like Metallica or Anthrax, playing 3,000-4,000 capacity places. And when Glenn came in and said, in late '83, after that gig in Detroit that went awry, and he goes, I broke up the band. I went, why? I says, I thought you were just going to do a solo thing and then keep doing the band. I says, do a solo thing and keep doing the Misfits. I says, you're on the edge of something big. And he's like, no, can't do it. And I went, okay, let me know when you get the new band together. So
Well, they got theirs years later, obviously. I mean, it's
Oh yeah,
hey,
yeah. It's funny. I think that there are some people that didn't think that could happen. I back then thought it could eventually happen
yeah,
because they had people love a gimmick and they had everything going for them. When you would go and see a regular band, you're just like, oh, okay, they're good. But they would only play New York maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. And it was always like an event. It was a big event. The amps, even back then, the amps with the skulls, the red backlight on the bass drum, skulls all over the stage. I mean, even to the point of like spray painting distortion boxes black and putting like red bat stickers on them so that they would look like part of this stage. I mean, it was they were very detail oriented. And I think that, I think Glenn and Jerry made a good team, both very, very charismatic guys. Jerry was always really cool with me. I always got along. I always got along fine with Glenn. I think that with him, when you could kind of not just say, "Oh man, I really love your band," but you could kind of ask him, "Well, what does this lyric mean, or what does that lyric mean, or what were you going for here?" Then he'd kind of open up and be into talking about it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. The Misfits guys, even the future generations, the 90s era, they're
Right,
all cool people individually. You put some
right,
of them together for whatever reason, there's static, but as
yeah.
people, I don't think there's a jerk in the bunch. They're just very
No,
people.
no. No, Glenn taught me about advances. I thought the record company just gave you money. And he goes, no, no, you got to pay that back. I'm like, well, how can you pay it back? He says, they take it out of your future earnings. I went, your royalties. So I went, oh, you know. And so that was cool that way. He taught me about the business a little bit. And he he would always come up to me after a show and say, "What'd you think?"
Mm.
I mean, after the first Sam Hain show, he came up to me and a couple of my friends, my friend Mike Frigerio, Mike Mindless, and he said, "What'd you guys think?" And right away he goes, "What'd you think of Lyle?" I said, "Great guitar player," but I said, "He doesn't fit the image, and I know how important image is to you. So you got a decision to make." And he went, "Okay." you know, and it was he was. I sometimes think he gets a bad rap, or people don't think he has a sense of humor. I have another memory where the opening night of Spinal Tap in New York, I walk into the theater and my girlfriend and I get the last two seats, and I see once again Mike like two seats away. So then after the movie, we're just all out on the sidewalk cracking up and like talking different lines from the movie. Who comes walking up? Glenn. And he's like, was that the freaking greatest movie ever or what? So, even, he was there he wanted to see the first showing of Spinal Tap. So, it's not like I think he has a great sense of humor. It's just, he's got a certain image that he has to live up to, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And funny with my history with the Misfits, I've only met Danzig once,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at a prong record release party out in Hollywood.
Oh,
When
mm-hmm.
I lived out in LA. And you can't miss the guy. He walks in, you automatically know who it is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I gotta say something, I gotta,
Yeah.
and I made a point not to like crawl up his ass. I kept it like
No,
kind of
don't do
quick and friendly.
that.
But he was cool as hell. Like he was totally soft spoken, mellow,
Yeah.
you know, um, just chill. So I'm like, cool, I had my nice experience with Glenn. Now I can move on, like
Yeah. He's a smart guy. Well, we used to talk on the phone. We talk about religion. Uh, he, y- you know, there were people that sometimes I think thought that I don't know. They think ridiculous stuff like it was a Satan worshiper or something like that, which is total bullshit. What was interesting to him was that, and we talked about this once, how, time and time again, you could see somebody that looked like a really mild person, and the neighbors would say, "Oh, he was such a great guy," and then they just go berserk and
Right.
like, kill their family or do something absolutely horrible. And he would say, what in the human condition makes somebody to do that? And there was like an interest there in that, as to like, why would somebody do that? You know. So he had a lot of facets to him beyond just the Misfits.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And Sam Hain proved that.
Oh
You
yeah,
otherwise, for sure.
right,
Going back to AOD, so you do
right,
the first EP with them. Um, I guess not too long after that point, you part ways with the band and they get
right,
books. Um,
right.
what led to the parting of the ways at that point in time?
Well, what all three members have said is accurate. So what Jack said, that they were getting too silly. Yes, this is true. Um, Paul said, I wanted to slow it down and get it chunkier. Not so much slow it down, but I was really getting into like Motorhead and Venom and Discharge and GBH, kind of like the blast beat stuff, which is a little different from the thrash beat. So it's like, why do we have to just do thrash beat? I kind of want that boom that boom that type of thing, that the blast beat type of thing. And I just thought, well, we have a chance to make this heavier. And also, I think that um, I was the most aspirational of all of them. And yet again, here again, I was a little bit older. So I could see us reaching more people. I could see us reaching the metal people in a year or two. And I could foresee certain things, and they weren't on board. And I was kind of like, well, I feel like I'm being a party pooper for them. So the best idea is just to move on. Now that everybody's older, they kind of acknowledge, oh, okay, yeah, he wanted to practice because he wanted us to be like a really great band. But at the time, they're like, oh, you're being a pain and you're being a stickler and you're being this and being that. Now that they're older, they say, oh, okay, now I understand where he was coming from, because they have that sense of perspective. But you have to understand, at the time they were, I don't know, they was 16 or 17 and those guys were 19 or 20. So they just wanted to have fun. I wanted to I didn't think we could quite get to the Misfits level, but why not shoot for it?
Mhm.
You know?
Well, I mean, they later on, when Bruce
Yeah.
joined and started putting out albums,
Oh
AOD
yeah.
did a great run. They did get,
Yeah.
a certain amount of acknowledgement and,
Right.
you know, um, streamlined their approach quite a bit as well in the later years.
Right.
Um, they were gods. AOD, you guys were gods in Jersey when I was coming up learning about all this, you know. Uh,
Yeah.
there are certain people in the band I think would smile at that, and there may be one or two who'd kind of go, "Oh, geez." But,
No, I think it's humorous. And what, like I said before, I'll say to Jack, I'll say, don't these kids know who we are? I says I says we should start passing around a collection plate at every hardcore show. I says we're just gonna show up with a collection plate and say, oh yeah, old hardcore guy collection plate, retirement funding.
it's like with the old blues guys, right?
Yeah,
Like they're going
yeah,
to like Rolling
yeah,
Stone shows, and like,
yeah,
where's my
yeah,
money?
yeah.
Yeah,
I think I said to Jack, I says, these bands like I said these bands like NoFX and who's the other one? Who was Dead Milkmen? You know,
hmm.
Trans Am, Bitch and Camaro. Yeah, okay. Uh, where'd they get that from? but yeah, you know,
Well, let me bounce off that, and I asked the other guys in the band this.
sure.
Um, they've done reunions
Right.
really since the 90s here and there.
Hmm.
They did one with you, and they're going to have another one with you, and I'll get to that
Hmm.
later. Um, but whenever AOD sort of pops up again, people do get interested and excited,
Hmm.
and there are pretty well-known successful musicians who readily acknowledge AOD. There's a whole Jack White Gibby thing, covering
Right.
Paul's Not Home, and so people to this day get hyped when AOD comes back. We're talking
Right.
about a band that started almost 45 years ago.
Right.
Having been there in the beginning, what do you think was the ingredient or mix of ingredients that made that band to the point where it's relevant now, that you've got
Um,
things happening now?
I think one important thing is, and I've always felt this way about bands, um, if you're if you write a lot of songs about current political issues, that dates you.
Mhm.
Suburbia is always going to be suburbia, right? Uh, you know, I always joke with Paul that I said, "You sure you want to write a song about old people? It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Someday you're going to be old and singing this stupid thing." And then when he came in with Hijack, I said, another old person song." They were good songs, but I'm kind of like, okay, he's got issues with old people. All right. I just kind of went with the flow and thought, well, this is funny. I'm not going to say no. We're not doing this. I just thought, oh, okay. But yeah, so I think it's important to write timeless songs, and also those songs, unlike some of the other hardcore bands, very melodic.
Mhm.
Paul always uh, every no, I shouldn't say just Paul. Everybody in the band liked melody. That's not to say that we weren't into like people that were a little more noisy, like like Black Flag or somebody like that. But you know, we were very melodic, and I think that when you write songs that are melodic and catchy, "Suburbia" is a very catchy song.
Mhm.
You know, "Rock and Roll Gas Station" is not only catchy, it's hilarious. I told Jack, I says, I said, when you put out Wacky Hijinks, and I said, wow, these were a lot of the songs that I was playing that you've recorded when we were playing those songs live. But then when I heard, I said, oh man, this is a great song. I wish it was me playing on this. I just, this is, this is hilarious. And I knew the gas station that they were talking about.
Mhm.
You go to the gas station and there would be guys, with this giant boombox, blasting metal, like blasting Priest and stuff like that, and smoking weed and smoking cigarettes and drinking beer.
So, w- moving on from AOD and the years that
Right.
followed, was Lurch the next band you had going?
Yeah, yeah. That was with succession of vocalists. Once again, my friend Mike Frigerio, and this phenomenal drummer, um, Todd Irwin, who I met at the Center for Media Arts. I went there for their recording engineering program, like 84, 85. And I was looking for a drummer, and somebody just mentioned, oh, he's a drummer. God bless him. He lived on 16th Street, and somehow he was willing to take the path to Harrison. I would drive down to Harrison, pick him up, take him to Mike's house in the basement in Kenilworth once or twice a week, and we practice. And Mike was great because Mike got exactly what I was going for. I said, hey, listen, man, I want to do something really, really heavy, not super fast thrash. Still got to be melodic. And Mike was going through like a Lemmy period where he had the Rickenbacker bass and he was playing through a 50-watt Marshall guitar head and an old acoustic bass cabinet and head. So, oh my, I don't know how the neighbors didn't. want to send the cops to us after us, but we were incredibly loud. And like I said, we had 3 or 4 singers. We actually did something on a Porta studio, and at one point I thought, well, I still have my high school friend Bob Fetz sang on it. Bob Fetz, I went to high school with in Madison. He moved down to Florida and was an integral member of the Gainesville, Florida punk scene. And he started a band called Roach Motel. And so he came up on vacation. I said, hey, do you want to sing on these 3 songs? He knocked them out. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, these Porta Studios were 4-track. I could conceivably fly his vocals in and like record new tracks, but I need to see if Todd would be into it. And unfortunately, Mike passed away, so I guess it would be me playing the bass. But they were good songs, very heavy. We actually played at CBGB's, and an A&R person from Combat Records was hanging out there, and she came up to me and she said, what are you trying to do? I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, there's elements of metal and there's elements of punk, and that's kind of a new thing. There's really nobody doing that, or very few. And I said, well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And she goes, well, what's going on with your vocalist? I says, oh, well, he's not into it. He wants to leave. He wants to do his own thing. So she was like, well, if you need any help. But I was kind of like, this doesn't seem to be working out or going anywhere because we can't figure out the whole vocals thing. So I should have listened to her and said maybe she could have found us somebody permanent. I mean, even Bruce Wingate sang with us for 2 or 3 practices. And then Mike was like, oh, I'm going to go. Then at that point, Mike got an offer to go join the Skulls from Charlie Pipp. And he's like, I think we've tried this for like a year and a half. And we've had like 3 gigs and it was fun, but I'm going to go play with Charlie. But, Mike's such a chill guy and did it in such a nice way. I was like, oh, okay.
Now, I just posted a video. My most recent video is with Mike Hideous.
Oh, okay.
And we were talking about, the early
Oh,
start of his career. And he mentioned
yeah.
you specifically. First of all, he sends his regards. He says,
Oh, cool.
and he asked me to ask you about the time you ran into him at the Willowbrook Mall parking lot
Not ran into.
or met up with
He,
him.
yeah, he was forming a band, and once again, it was all bands I liked. And I said, I called him up and I said, okay, are you really into these bands? He goes, yeah. I'm into the Misfits. I'm into Sam Hain. I'm like, oh, great. And went and met him at Willowbrook Mall. And, he already had the image down. He had the hair in front of his face, studded leather jacket. And, we at one point found somebody who was willing to play bass. And then I even went over, did I go with my guitar? I don't remember. I went over to his house on the east side of Patterson. And we were hanging out, and I showed him a few song ideas. I think I did take my guitar, but kind of like he would call me up periodically as and saying where he is with like finding a drummer, and then it just kind of like fell apart. And not that it fell apart, it just never really went anywhere. And then I saw that he was doing Empire Hideous. I was like, oh, good, and it kind of became obvious that maybe it became obvious to him that if I go into something, I want like a stake in it. And he really had a vision of what he wanted to do. And, I would be willing to meet him, halfway or whatever. But, I don't know if I would have, ultimately ended up in Empire Hideous. It's unlikely. But yeah, I remember him being, young, really enthusiastic, determined guy. And I was like, we're not getting something together, but he's going to get something together. I could tell,
Yeah. Yeah. And he still is active, not so much in music, but
Right.
art, and always a gentleman, always a good guy. I
Oh
always
yeah.
connect with him.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's cool about doing this channel, man. I hadn't talked to Hideous in 20 years.
Oh wow. Yeah, I haven't talked to him in oh like oh God, it could be the same for me. I knew that he had sung did a short stint with the Misfits. I did know that. Um yeah, but yeah, it's been ages.
Yeah. Let's get into Electric Frankenstein.
Sure.
Um, and obviously, I've had a history with those guys as well.
Right.
I've known Dan for years. Actually, I met Dan through Jerry and Doyle in the mid 90s. So as soon as I met Dan, I got into Electric Frankenstein because he told
Hmm.
me about the band. I went out and got, I
Hmm.
think my first record was the Sweet Sickness EP.
Right, right,
So, it was kind of the early-ish times of EF.
right.
Now, it really kind of started with you and Sal, right? Sort of conceptualizing the band.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is that, Sal had the concept and we talk about the concept. And I don't know if he remembers this, but at one point he did ask me to join the thing. And I said, I don't know. I said, you guys kind of got your own unique thing going, and it's not really the type of music I'm down with. And he's like, well, you could come in and change it. I'm like, I says, why don't we just do something, on our own? I don't see myself as being in the thing. And I guess this would have been about like 1990 or so. And like I said, he had the concept down, and we would just talk back and forth about what the band should be like, uh how it should be great, how it was not going to be a grunge band. you know and yeah, at the time Dan was really into the gothic thing, and then he went off to LA, and I think we really didn't have anything to offer him at all at that point. So he would kind of, Sal and I were working on some song ideas, and he would be there or he wouldn't be there, and I think that he was really really down with working with Roz and Christian Death and Eva and Shadow Project, and he had success with that.
Mm.
And Sal and I were very determined, but it was really kind of early on for for him to commit. Like if somebody from LA had said to me, "Well, you can try to hang out with these two, like your older brother and his friend, significantly older, or you have this offer," yeah, of course he's going to go to LA.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
it took a while for the EF lineup to kind of stabilize.
Oh, three, 3 years going through drummers and going through singers, and oh gosh, uh, it seems like two or three times we thought somebody would be possibly a good singer, and we'd meet him, and we'd realize that they were, which was the big thing at the time on Lower East Side, they were a heroin addict.
Mm.
One guy we were talking to, and he started to nod out as we're talking to him. We're like, okay. We just left him there. I never saw him again or spoke to him again. You know, and the Steve thing was very interesting. And we had that guy Frank before Steve, but I found Steve through an ad in East Coast Rocker Aquarium, and Steve was basically saying, "Hey, I'm forming a band. I'm a guitar player, but I write songs, but I do sing as well." So, you know, I called him up, and he's like, "Nah, nah, nah. Steve, I'm not interested in being the singer for a band. I'm a guitar player." And I went, "Well," I said, "we've been playing um, the tracks for people, Sal already had, a couple people lined up, and we were playing them the tracks without vocals. And they were like, oh, this is great. Just get a good vocalist." I says, "They're done." I says, what's there to lose, man? Just come down and sing on them. Come and listen. I says, come listen to the tracks. If you hate them, no hard feeling, fine. So we met up with him at Sal's parents' house, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll sing on these." And that's basically how it started. And it's kind of funny because looking back on it, I would always say to Sal, I'm envisioning like a Chris Bailey from the Saints or a Rick Rick type of singer. And I wasn't envisioning like what Steve ended up doing at all. But then when, he came in and we went into this little recording studio in Caldwell, 8-track studio, and I first heard him singing, I went, this is totally not what I was expecting, but this is great. So like just adjust your expectations, This is kind of like a left turn, but we're going to go with this. And we all agreed, yeah, let's go with this. This is something new. This is fresh. And I just thought it was great. I was like, God, this guy's like a combination of Bon Scott, Brian Johnson, and Noddy Holder from Slade.
Yes,
It's
yes.
people don't know that when Bon Scott died, they were considering asking Noddy Holder, and they were like, "Oh, we don't want a guy from a big band like that. We want somebody a little more less established." And but I always thought that that's kind of what Steve's voice was like. I always thought, he was just a great singer. I was always trying to get him to do stuff that was like maybe a little bluesier, like Bad Company type of vocals. But I just think that he was, or Steve Marriott. And I used to say to him, your voice is as good as his. He'd be like, nah, nah, nah. So
No, Steve's great. I mean, Steve is
yeah.
rock and roll. He's
Oh
probably,
yeah.
I mean, there's no probably. He is the most rock and roll person
Oh
I
yeah.
up on drums. Like that guy is just, he switches it on, and
Oh yeah.
he's that way 24/7. I mean, he's just, you know,
Yeah.
down at the barbecue, he's rock and roll. I mean, he can't escape it.
He's not like me who goes off to his like office job and sits at a desk. Nah, he's that way all the time, which I just respect 100%.
Well, I think, before I really got to know the brothers,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting the records, and that lineup you had with Steve, the Canzonaries, yourself, and John Steele,
Oh yeah.
now era, forget it. I mean, talk about a powerhouse lineup of musicians. We got to talk about John Steele because that
Right.
guy strikes fear in the hearts of every other drummer on the planet, in my opinion. It's
Oh
ridiculous.
yeah. That it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, and it's funny because uh, once again, like have you heard the original version of Teenage Shutdown with that drummer Renee?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So that beginning that goes that kind of goes dun 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 dun. It's I kind of came up with that, and so then when John came in, I got all ready to tell him, well, this is what you do, but he just did his own thing, and I went, there's nothing to say.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell him what to do. Yeah, every so often, Sal, me, Dan would make, or Steve would make a suggestion about maybe an accent or here like that, but nah, he had it locked up, and it's interesting, and I should find it sometime. But Scott Wilkins walked in to one rehearsal, and he goes, "I'm giving you this tape." He goes, "It's from the Euclid Tavern in Cleveland. Somebody gave it to me." He goes, "I don't know why they did this, but they must have stood right next to your amp. All you can hear is me and John." And it sounds like a freight train. It's just like we are like locked in. And the thing that John and I had is that my time is pretty decent. It's not perfect, but it's pretty decent. But I would always be a little bit ahead of him, and he would hold me back. And there were times where I turn around and mouth like too slow, and he would just turn his head like, I'm not listening to you. Like, no, no, this is the tempo. You're just getting, adrenalized from, for the show. He'd be like, he'd just go like this, kind of like, no, Jim, and not look me in the eye and keep it at that tempo. And yeah, so I always thought there was this cool little like push and pull between me trying to sometimes trying to get him to go a little faster and him being like, no, and holding me back, which is actually the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. I wanted to get into the Scott era a bit because,
Okay, sure.
I think, and I've had Scott on the channel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We talked about it. That was really when EF just took off. The 6 songs,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
He was a good front man.
and I know that was, you guys were playing California,
Oh
touring
yeah.
with Scott. And obviously I've played with Steve in EF, and I've seen the
Hmm.
videos of Scott. And
Hmm.
Scott made the comment when we talked about how it was kind of night and day, both, as far as being
Yeah.
front man of a band. Um, what do you think Scott's ultimate impact was on the band during his time with you guys?
Well, he he was just a good front man, very active on stage, very engaged with the crowd. Plus, coming from his previous band, Verbal Abuse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Verbal Abuse. I wanted to make sure it was right. Verbal Abuse. He already had somewhat of a fan base from touring, so up and down California. Oh yeah, let's go see Scott's new band. They maybe knew about us, but our first trip out there was like, well, there's this new band that we've read about, like in Flipside, and also Scott's singing with them now. So he had, people that knew about him. And I mean, that was great because we ended up staying at friends of his in Newport Beach, in the Hollywood Hills. It was great going out for burritos and margaritas and, first exposure to California. I loved it. I loved it out there. And yeah, he was good. I saw your podcast with him and I was like, yeah, that's basically true. What he said to Sally, he goes, I'm not going to sing like Steve. I can't sing like Steve, but I'll be a great front man. And that's absolutely true. And, the kudos he gave me for, the 6 songs record. Yeah. That's appreciated, you know, because I think that there's times where people don't know how big a part everybody played
Hmm.
in that band, and everybody had a part to play, you know. And Sal was the big promotional guy. He would like show me the artwork, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's great." We'd have different ideas of what to do. It was kind of like we made this effort not to put our picture on the records. Like, who cares what we look like? Let's just get cool artwork. And I think I'm right. I don't think there was a picture of us until How to Make a Monster, and they insisted. I
I
don't
think,
think I don't remember any of the records up till then having our picture, at least not on the cover or back cover.
what? I think you're right. I
Right.
was thinking first, I know there was that Rick thing that Munster put out, that gatefold.
Yeah.
That's got a
Yeah.
picture
Yeah.
of the Scotty lineup, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
think that was
yeah.
even after How to Make a
No,
Monster.
that was after, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're totally right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there was you know, um, like Dave said, there's I don't know. I've always when it's come to bands, I've always had a uh, just a a big. I've always had a work ethic, you know, and there were other bands, after that Lurch band, and if I would get in there and I'd say, okay, I'm going to give it 6 months, and if I didn't see that work ethic, I'd be like, I'm out. And it's kind of funny, but that whole work ethic derived from in being an 18-year-old kid and meeting Johnny Ramone, and once again, my friend Bob Fetz being fearless and wanting to meet people he respected. We went to a show at the Show Place that the Ramones played. We were leaning against the stage the whole time where Johnny's marshals were blasting us. It was just the best thing. So we walk into the dressing room, and right away it becomes obvious to me, you're going to talk to Johnny. Joey, was always kind of, hey man, what's going on? It's a sweetheart, but shy. Marky, no, you're not. Marky was a great drummer, but I'm not going to talk to him. I'm not a drummer. And Dee Dee, we kind of got to know Arturo Vega a little bit, and he would see the two of us, and he'd be like, "Sure, come on back," and it would be Bob and I and the Ramones and maybe two other people, and that happened 4 or 5 times. And Dee Dee, I swear, was different every single time. I don't know what was going on, but he'd be really outgoing and friendly. Then the next time be nasty, and then the next time be subdued. Then the next time be wacky. It was just crazy. So I immediately gravitated to Johnny, and Johnny just, I don't know what he saw in me, but he goes, "Hey, do you go to school?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to college." He goes, "How many people can your gym fit?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500. He goes, "You think we could play there?" I said, "I don't know." He goes, "Do you know who to ask?" I says, "Yeah, I think so. I know the guy that puts on, it's kind of like some guy who was like a junior or senior would just put shows on." And he starts writing out the booking agency's name, Premier Talent.
Hmm.
And so then I guess he saw a hesitation in me. He goes, "What, you're not going to do it?" And I just thought, oh, okay. Johnny Ramone's telling me I have to go do this. I have to go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow him having faith in me and it just pushed me through my shyness. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do that. Ultimately, I went and talked to the guy at the college. He's like, no, 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 I don't want to deal with the Ramones crowd. I'm trying to get Elvis Costello, you know. But the nice thing about Johnny was that over the course of 2, 3 years after that, I would see him at different places, and I go up to him and he go, "Oh, hey, what's up?" I says, "You remember me?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. That you're friends with that guy Bob, the kid with the glasses and the black hair." And I go, "That's it." I don't know why, after seeing thousands of people, he would always remember me. And he go, "Well, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I got more serious on guitar." He goes, "Well, you're not going to wait a long time, right? Just get out there and play. Get out there, go do it." He says, "Look," he goes, "Look at me." He says, "I'm just playing a bunch of bar chords. Just go out there and do it." So he was probably my biggest inspiration. But the funny thing with that is, his work ethic is famous, you know. So I kind of would bring that into bands and sometimes be like impatient, kind of like, come on, let's go. What are we doing?" And I didn't really have time for like nonsense or being unfocused or drinking or getting a fucked up. I just, to me, it was like, let's work and let's try to be the biggest possible band we can be. And I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe I could have been another way, but I think that I'll always appreciate what Johnny did. Just in that, like, 5-minute exchange, like, for some reason having some type of faith in me, and I don't know where it came from, but I was just kind of like, oh, well, if he's telling me to do this and I went and do it, then I can go do a band. I can play guitar as good as he can. Certainly, I know how to play. I think now, if you put on any of the first 4 Ramones albums, I could put on guitar and play along to them and pick it up each song within like 10, 20 seconds.
Hmm.
So, you know, it was just good life lesson there from him that I'll always appreciate.
Absolutely. Um, I wanted to also touch on Rick Elric.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I think you made a great EP with him, which
Oh
eventually
yeah.
was a great compilation album.
Oh yeah.
Um, of the EF singers, I think obviously he, obviously had his legendary status in
Right.
California before you guys crossed paths. But if
Right.
if I would kind of define Rick Rick's involvement with EF. He made it darker. He made
Yeah,
it,
and yeah, it's interesting because, you know, when we were looking for vocalists, Sal and I always used to say, wouldn't it be great if we could get Rick to sing for Electric Frankenstein? He was like who we wanted, but we thought, oh well, he's in LA and we're nothing right now. We'll never get him. And you know, Rick was quiet, but you know, pretty stable, down to earth. And there's been times where it's kind of like wonder, well, you know, if he had, for whatever crazy reason, had, if we had moved to LA or he had moved to New Jersey, and you know, we had written songs based around his singing style, you understand, what would the band have been like? Because you know, he tried to come in and sing those songs, and he's a very deep, I don't know, what would that be, like a baritone, you
mm,
know? And whereas both Steve and Scott were singing in a higher register, so it was really difficult for him. But sometimes I think, well, you know, what would have happened if he had been there from the get-go? You know, it just, you know, it's a shame. It's a shame in a way because, yeah, I liked doing that record with him. He was such a quiet guy, though. You know,
mm.
I always remember him. I always remember recording at Water Music in Hoboken, and he was friends with Josh Silverman, and Josh showed. It was hot out. It was like 85 degrees, and Josh showed up in like an overcoat and a sweater. And I'm like, dude, even with air conditioning, it's not cold in here. So it was the first time I met Josh, and then I kind of learned a bit more about Josh's story. I was like, oh, okay.
Right, right.
You know,
Yeah. He was you know, when I had John's,
character.
we went off about Josh. Yeah, interesting character, brilliant
Very interesting. Oh
songwriter.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That the record he did with you know, with John Steele and Anthony Trance, right?
Yeah, the Johnny and the Has-Beens record.
Yeah, Giant thank you for my, yeah, I, you know, when after Electric Frankenstein, when John and I were doing some seeing if we could do a band with Steve, we used to play This Perfect Crime.
Mm,
Because I said, John, this is a great song. I said, the band doesn't exist. You know, the people, you know, Anthony's gone. I said, can we play the song? He goes, yeah, let's play it. I loved playing that song. It's just a great, great song.
yeah, and that's a great record too.
Oh
That
yeah, well recorded. You know, sounds great. I love playing that record.
yeah, fantastic stuff.
Yeah,
Eventually Steve comes back.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that leads to some EPs, just a couple of singles. EF is never
yeah.
prolific, just a couple things here or there.
Yeah, I have my, it's funny. I have my own opinions on that. I totally understand why Sal was doing that. Um I I still remember a specific instance which was really funny, where we had just finished Conquers the World, and I think this was yeah, the end of July of 95. And I'm like, phew, we're done with Conquers the World. To show you how much work that was, I walked out of the last day of mixing on a Sunday. I had to run to the parking garage because it was 5 minutes to 6 in the morning,
Mm.
and I'd get charged like another 10 or 15 bucks if it went past 6. So I got there like 2 minutes to 6, drove home with, you know, everybody's commuting into Manhattan. I think I slept for like 3 hours. Then I was going on my vacation down the Jersey Shore. Then I come back. We have a rehearsal, and Sal goes, I promised another record for like the beginning of October. I went, what? I said, we just finished an album. What are you doing? And so then he goes, and I'm going to Sicily for 3 weeks. I went, wait, what? And so then he goes to Sicily, and this is funny because it was pretty much me, John, and Dan, just the three of us, not the 5-piece. And, we were working on some stuff, a few ideas that, everybody had worked on, some stuff that I brought in. And poor Steve, I still feel bad about this. He came down to the rehearsal with his guitar. And, he's a great player, better player than me, right? And he just starts doing these riffs and these leads over the top of everything. But I'm focused on getting the arrangements down. And finally, it was getting really distracting. And I just went, Steve, just play the basic parts of the song. I'm just trying to get the arrangements down. And he just got pissed off. And we didn't see him for until Sal came back. And so the three of us were kind of working on the record, and it was like this tight little unit. And yeah, we were working on Time Is Now, other songs, Demolition Joyride. And it was kind of a fun time just having the three of us there. And then Sal came back and went, well, how'd it go? And I said, well, yeah, good. I think we'll be ready. I says, I kind of can't believe it. Then, we recorded that record. And I still think that was Steve's best performance. I think that was, he still was great, but I always felt that like on Demolition Joyride, I always felt that was his pinnacle. Yeah. Where, I remember I was working, so I didn't come into the session until maybe 6, 7 o'clock. And Sal goes, well, listen, this is what we did for Demolition Joyride. I said, wow. I said, you guys came up with this, with the whole, the melodic vocal in the one speaker and the screamed out crazy vocal in the other one. And I went, holy shit, this is great, guys. This is just fantastic. I was really, really impressed. And it's funny because I've always thought that was just his pinnacle. He might disagree, but that's just my personal opinion.
Well, getting into How to Make a Monster,
right?
It was a big record for the band.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Putting my fan hat on for a minute,
right?
It's probably not my favorite EF record. I lean more towards the earlier.
It's funny because there's a lot of people that feel that way. I, looking back, think that How to Make a Monster is the best, just from a standpoint of variety, and that we were continuing to get better as arrangers. Some of the early stuff, I think there's really great parts on there, but I feel like I still didn't have that great an understanding sometimes of arranging. It's funny you say that, because Sal would just say things, and I'm kind of more technically minded. Sal would go, this song needs more parts. And I'd say, well, what do you mean more parts? And what he meant was, well, the arrangement should do this or this or this, but he was just saying parts. So my brain would just go, huh? And now I look back and recognize, yeah, he was saying the arrangements need to be better. And eventually, from record to record, we were getting better at that. And I really think that How to Make the Monster, look at a song like Speed Girl, which was a collective effort. There's different pieces, like the outro bass part, that Dan came up with that. Sal, had an idea for a riff, but he kind of played something. I said, well, it shouldn't be that. It should be this. And he went, yeah, let's do that. That was, and my riff there, it's ZZ Top. It's ZZ Top or Motorhead, No Class. That's what it is. It's just basically inspired by that. And, I think that Speed Girl is really, really well arranged. There's a lot of different parts. The arrangement is good. And I think that we were getting better and better at that. And now when I listen to some of the early stuff, I go, yeah, it's a good riff, but, so I'm kind of critical, maybe, and I'm probably more critical of my own writing of the early stuff than anybody else's.
Well, How to Make a Monster is not my favorite record by you guys, but where I was going with that is because I was hanging with Sound Dan quite a bit at that time.
Right.
I know, you guys had signed to Victory. There was a lot of
Yeah.
anticipation,
Oh
and
yeah.
you guys were working hard on that record. And when I heard the record, I'm like, it's next level EF.
Mm.
It's like you take a song like Pretty Deadly, the arrangements of that couldn't be on Conquers the World.
No,
You know what I mean?
no, no. And when Dan brought that in initially, I was like, I don't know. And then I thought, well, you can't look at this. You have to look at this like we're on a bigger label. You have to have variety on a record.
Hmm.
You can't just have Speak Girl over and over again, or I don't know, or you know, don't know how to stop you over and over again. That style. We have to have something that's a bit different from that, and that's what Dan brought in,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah,
thought it worked.
definitely works on that record. It's a good sounding record. I could tell hearing it for the first time, and I had to live with it a lot a couple years back when I wrote the
Right,
liner notes for the reissue, so it was playing
right.
a and I can tell this is a band that's working hard.
Yeah, yeah. Writing that record, we actually came up with some songs, and actually, chucked them and went back to the beginning, and we were rehearsing in the rehearsal studio twice a week, and then on Sundays at Sal's house playing very quietly in the basement, and Rob putting towels over his drums, and saying, instead of blasting ourselves out, let's play really quietly so we can get a sense of where these arrangements are going. Yeah, and I would say for like doing that for 2 to 3 months before we started recording the record, which I think we started recording that in uh it was called, I think it was winter February of 99. Yeah, I think it was February of 99.
And I appreciate you mentioning Rob because I want to make sure he was
Oh
part of.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Difference between John and Rob is, if you're on stage with John, you feel this force coming up through your legs and going up your body. Okay. Now with Rob, you feel this pressure on the lower part of your back that feels like it's going to push you off the stage. And it's funny because when he would play, we would have to make sure to put nails in front of the bass kick drum because it was always moving forward. And it's the interesting thing is that like Action High, I only wanted to play that with John. Other drummers have done a good job, but I only really liked playing it with John. And then consequently, a song like Rockin' in My Veins, I only want to play that with Rob
Right.
because it has this almost kind of reminiscent of that bouncy groove that Fu Manchu had in the 90s. And I was like, I wonder if he's pulling this from Fu Manchu. I never asked him, but I was a big Fu Manchu fan. And it had this kind of like made you like this and up and down bouncy groove. And I never wanted to play that song with anybody else. I'm like, if the bouncy groove's not there, I don't want to do it.
That's
You
a good way
know?
of putting it. The bounce, the Rob.
Yeah, there was a groove and a bounce to what he did, which was fun, and it was totally different from John. And but it was fun playing with him as well. I enjoyed playing with both of them.
Yeah, both very distinct drummers. I had to
Oh
learn
yeah,
both of their
oh yeah,
styles.
oh yeah.
Um, you know, John's like Bill Ward from Sabbath, where
Yes,
at first listen, you don't think it's very technical, but it's technical as hell, and there's a lot of ebb and flow.
yes,
It's almost like you're conducting an orchestra playing with a drummer like that.
right,
Rob is from the gut, bounce, bump, bump, bump,
right,
tap, 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 but
right.
great fills, great
Yes,
drum.
yep, yep.
Um,
Willing, very. very willing to take chances.
Hmm.
You know, very willing to take chances. And this is what's funny: total opposites. With John, John wants to come into the studio. He wants you to have your song idea ready. He wants to work on it. He doesn't want to waste time. He wants to go. And Rob's like, why can't we just come up with a riff and then, like, you know, kind of jam on a little bit and see where it goes? Polar opposites of
Hmm.
each other, you know, which is interesting.
Now, you did a solid 10 years in Electric Frankenstein.
Well, yeah, I would say not really 10. Because we didn't really start practicing until about, oh, was it very late 91 or early 92? I mean, Sal and I were talking about it from maybe as early as 1989. We were talking about it. But as far as like really playing with people, I think that was late 91. And I was out like, I don't know, early fall 99, I think.
Hmm. What led to the decision to kind of move on?
I think that I was getting fried. I think whether they had asked me to go or not, I would have been out just of my own accord in a few months. Because getting back to, I am sure that there are Electric Frankenstein fans that would completely disagree with me. But I've mentioned this to a few people, and I think that uh, if you combined Conquers the World with Time Is Now, you have an all killer, no filler, right? And I think if you combined Listen Up Baby with How to Make a Monster, same thing. And I've kind of felt like, well, why are we throwing all this material out there? I'm I'm always going to hang back and want, up until the last minute. There were times where I was changing stuff of my own to try to make it better, not only in the last rehearsal session, sometimes getting to the recording studio and going and hearing it back to the monitors with that clarity and going, can we do this? And, taking 15, 20 minutes and saying, well, let's just work on that little part. That happened 2 or 3 times. And I just, it became apparent to me that no, they wanted to continue with just, doing tons of releases. And I was just like, you know, we're on a bigger label now. I think that as we keep getting bigger and bigger, I didn't see the necessity to keep doing tons of releases. I think that early on, it was a great strategy. And Sal was smart. He was looking at it from a marketing standpoint as, here's a band that these are guys with jobs. They don't want to leave their jobs. They can't tour a ton. So the way to compensate for that is to keep having these releases hitting the market so that the interest is there, so that when we do go play this place the one time a year or once every 2 years, it's going to be full. But I felt like, well, okay, now we've reached the point we are playing a lot. We really should concentrate on just doing the absolute best record we possibly can. And yeah, I can go back and listen to How to Make a Monster. There are going to be fans that are going to say, oh, that's a fantastic record. For me, I was there and I have my own unique perspective of it. And I think, yeah, it was good. Was it like the big knockout I was hoping it could be? No, we didn't quite get there. And that's not that, that's, I'll take the blame for that. That's on me as much as anybody else. And it's just kind of, you reach a point where you're like, well, I'm thinking this, they're thinking that. Also bands are about alliances. And Rob got Carlin, who I had seen play in Skin Candy. I thought he was a fantastic guitar player. I'm like, oh, makes sense. Fine. Whatever. And I can look at things like this. I'm playing with Adrenalin O.D again, which I didn't expect to do. I have from time to time played with Electric Frankenstein again. And regardless of the fact whether I am playing, excuse me, live with those bands or not, they're playing songs I wrote. So,
Mhm.
so there's a legacy there, right? Which I'm proud of. And you know, if playing these Adrenalin O.D reunions, I think, you know, could we get the EF original guys together like one more time to play some shows before we're too much older and can't do it, you
Well,
know?
hold on. What would be the original? Because the original would be
No, the classic original, which is, you know, me, John, Canzoneri brothers, and Steve.
right.
You know, if we could find a way to do that and get, you know, decent shows. We did do it once, but it was just at the Clash Bar. And, you know, maybe there was like 50, 60 people there. If
Right.
we could do it right, you know, maybe do, you know, a couple California shows, a Chicago show, you know, where else were we? Oh, Cleveland, we were always did well in, something like that. Just like 4 or 5 shows, you know, and then say, okay, that's it. I think that would be good.
That would be awesome.
I never say never, right? You never know.
I never saw that lineup live. I
Oh,
had the records, but I never saw it live.
yeah, yeah, it was a good lineup though. When I look back, for me, I thought the best show we ever played when I was in the lineup, we always did well when there was competition. And we played this show in Philadelphia with Scott, and we were playing with Nashville Pussy, who ironically at the time were opening for us. And of course, you know, they were tight and pulled out all the stops. And we're like, well, we better be good. And we just killed it. And and so then after the show, Corey and Ryder come up to us and go, "You guys are the only band that can hold a candle to us." And we're like, "Oh, okay." And I thought, well, it's good to be confident in your own band. I can appreciate that. I thought it was funny, but I'm like, okay, cool. You know, I accept the compliment.
So you've got these AOD shows coming up
Right.
uh within a few days time. Uh,
Yeah.
and you mentioned a couple of years back you had done
Yeah.
stuff with the original AOD lineup.
Totally unexpected.
Yeah, when they announced these shows coming up, I had assumed it would be with Bruce.
Me too.
So I mean, I've got to ask you, you know, because the other guys brought this up too, the fact that, you know, age, you know, is a
Hmm.
factor now, and you know, Dave's
Hmm.
playing these super fast beats, and
Yeah.
you know, Jack, who's just, you know, the nicest guy in the world, but he was also very forthcoming about, you know, some ups and downs he's had over the years.
Right.
Um, for you, what's it like approaching AOD now as an older man? You know, to be in a room with the other three guys where you were, you know, so many years earlier.
Well, I think we kind of got through that, you know, when we did it the first time. When they first asked me and I attempted to play the songs, I was just like, oh my God, you have to be kidding me. You know, it had been 40 years. I thought I could not see any physical way that I could do it. And then I thought, well, you know, hold on, just hold on. And then I started to look at it, well, look upon it as a challenge that seems impossible, but maybe it's not.
Mm.
So then it took me, oh gosh, 2 to 3 months before I got up to Let's Barbecue speed. But I knew that they were going to play faster than Let's Barbecue speed. And then we got into the rehearsals, and I don't know what it is, but songs that I try to play at home at that speed that are really difficult, once I'm playing with the three of them, I can do it.
Mm.
And, you know, and now this time it's been easier, though there are some songs like Bugs, which are just like super fast, where I have to close my eyes and concentrate and kind of nod my head. And it takes all my focus to make sure that I'm in time. And and playing some of the songs that Bruce played on, Bugs, Rock and Roll Gas Station. What are some others? I'm thinking. Oh, I'd rather be asleep. Things like that. Uh, you know, uh, it just takes a lot of concentration. But it's funny because while I was practicing these songs, I realized a lot of them have similar patterns, and that pattern was kind of established when Paul wrote the song World War IV, which is a very, very early AOD song. I think we had that song in the first couple months. And so then when I was practicing these songs, I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of a similar pattern to this song, but it's transcribed to this key. So, it's just kind of getting up to speed, getting through it. And like I said, once you're playing with them, you just seem to be able to do it. And it's kind of funny because, yeah, I am older than them, but I'll try an example. I was watching that movie about, not that this is anything close to that, about that swimmer who at 64 or 65 years old swam from Cuba to Key West. That movie that's out now, I forget what it's called. And she had tried when she was younger and failed. And she tried 3 or 4 times in her 60s and finally did it. And I was like, well, if she can swim from Cuba to Florida, I think I could find a way to play the old AOT songs. It's kind of like, well, all right.
Excellent. Do you still do music otherwise these days?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think John mentioned it, and it's kind of funny. John, Sal, me, and Pete Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
We got together. Pete was playing bass, and we were working on some material, and we were like, we didn't know whether this was going to be Electric Frankenstein material because Dan was in North Carolina, but Sal was still here. And we didn't know if it was going to be EF material or not. And we recorded 2 songs, and, you just shake your head and go, how did this happen? They got lost. All I have is the MP3s. Now, maybe I could dress them up. I don't know. But, Sal sent me a couple different vocalists singing on these 2 songs. Once again, I'm kind of a perfectionist. I thought one, no, absolutely not. I thought the other person, yeah, decent, pretty good. Other people were no. I was kind of in the middle. So, I'd like to see those 2 songs at some point come out because they were really slamming. It was Steel on drums. I handled most of the rhythm and the lead. Sal threw some guitar down. Pete Marshall, you're talking about a guy that played bass with an Iggy Pop's band. So, he's a monster. He's a monster as well on guitar and bass. So, yeah, I'd like to see them come out at some point. And yeah, there's been 2 instances where I have played with Steve again, but tried to do a band with Steve, but we're just very different personalities. It's like we see each other and we have respect for each other, but I think the idea of like trying to do a band together again, we're like, nah. He wants to do things his way, and I want to do things my way. And within the context of Frankenstein, it works, but kind of outside of it, I think we're both kind of like, well, we tried,
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, cool. I can't wait to see you guys
Yeah.
at Connecticut.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely coming down for that. I've never seen the original band, yeah, obviously. Uh,
Mm.
I never saw the band with Bruce. The only time I saw AOD
Oh,
live was this kind of ad hoc version of the band because Paul had put on a benefit show
oh, yeah.
at the
They're calling it AOD. Yeah.
right. And it was a really bad blizzard, like a terrible blizzard that
Oh,
night. I think Bruce got stuck.
Oh,
So, and then Dave was in Florida. So
right.
it was Paul, Jack, and Greg Farah from the Kowalskis on drums.
Hmm.
Great show, but this
Right.
is gonna be the thing, so
Right.
definitely psyched to check it out.
Right.
It's been really great having you on, man. I've wanted to have
Oh,
a
it's been great. Great talking about everything. And, it's kind of nice to just think about everything that we collectively did in those two bands. And, uh, I'm always going to be proud of the fact that I got to be in not one band that got pretty popular, but two. You
yeah.
know, sometimes I think who says there couldn't be a third, but at this point it's funny because Lenny Splendorio, who's always been a great like a champion of me, he's always like said, "Oh, I love how you play guitar." He has always said to me, I just get a bunch of young guys. I know how you are. There aren't like older guys that can keep up with you. Well, obviously the AOD and the Electric Frankenstein guys can, but he says, just find guys like in their 30s and 40s. They'll be able to keep up with you. Just do that. And I thought, well, I'm like, yeah, he kind of makes sense. you know, it's just figuring out with everything I do with my job and everything and having like no free time. It's kind of like, well, maybe I'm going to have to be like Jerry with the Misfits. Like, oh, I have the luxury of being semi-retired now. I have time to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
you
Exactly.
know,
Well, we'll have to do this again, and we'll have to do an
yeah.
episode just on conversations that happened in the EF van on tour.
Oh my God.
Because good God,
Oh, oh my, oh my God. I could tell you such funny ones. John will tell me about how certain people would talk and he'd turn sideways and see me with my lopsided shit-eating grin and just kind of like smirk, like, and because I sometimes just wouldn't say anything, but I just roll my eyes and think, okay. But that's going to happen in any band. You throw a bunch of guys into guys, I shouldn't say guys, you throw a bunch of people of any gender together in a van, and that's what's going to happen. There's no way you can get four or five people together and have them agree on things. The one thing I will say for both bands, though, no matter what occurred during that day, nobody took it onto the stage.
hmm.
Always, ultimately, we have a job to do. We're going to be focused. We're going to play the best show we can. And that was true of everybody in both bands, which, don't take it onto the stage. Let's go. And, people like John Steele he was like the peacemaker in the band. If we start to argue about something, John would just click a stick and go, all right, ladies, shut up
Yeah.
already and let's play that song. Let's play the song. And everybody go, yeah, you're right. Okay, let's go. So that was kind of his role.
I loved traveling with those guys. I did Kung Fu Killers for a little bit too,
Right,
going down to like DC with those guys,
right.
going up to Canada with Steve and Sal in the van, and Drew Benfonte on bass. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Steve, Steve, Steve is such a character. But the, the good thing about Steve is wherever we would go, in the States or Europe, he always wanted to see the tourist attractions. And he would find a way to say, we're going to carve out time to go do this. And if other people didn't want to do that, like go see the tourist attractions and would want to go to a record store or something, he would go, come on, let's go. What are we, stupid? We can't learn a subway system in Milan? And you'd go and you think, yeah. He'd kind of like marshal us all and we'd get together, and we'd be going in these cathedrals and these castles. And that was always down to him. He always wanted to make sure that he didn't just do the gig and travel, but he got to see the sights. And he would just say, no, we're going and doing this. Let's go. And, I got to see some cool stuff because of him, just pushing. It was really great.
I mean, there are a lot of cool moments with Steve. In the
Yeah.
short time I was doing stuff with him. We were up somewhere in Canada,
Right.
and it was just the two of us. I think we're having breakfast somewhere.
Right.
He just stopped. He's like, you know what, Joel? I just love doing this. I do because I love it. It's just it's the best, and it was just nice to see somebody's enthusiasm for all the stuff you do when you're on the road.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And me, I have such respect for the musicians who will just get out there and play. They don't care how many people are there. I always want to see a full club. I got to feed off of that crowd. And if the crowd's lackadaisical or there's like five people there and they're not giving it, it's it's hard to get that going sometimes. I was always the one kind of like, is the next show going to be, like a big show? It always struck me as very weird that, you play LA and you're riding a high because you played to like 250 people and the club was packed. Then you go down to San Diego and there's 30 people milling around the next night. And you're like, huh? There's just no consistency, you know?
No, no, no. But yeah, it was. I got to say, Steve had his shit together.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I tour with them. I mean, talk about professional. He's the guy who told me when you're a drummer on stage, you don't play until you play. Meaning, like if the band's getting on stage, setting up, you don't do. It's like, no, you save it for the
Yeah.
gig. Don't make
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah. It was always a funny thing because, Dan and Sal didn't have pedals or anything like that. And I always had a couple pedals and a tuner. And I would say, please wait until I set my stuff up because you're just going to plug in and tune. But they'd always be looking at me like, are you done yet? I'm like, well, especially with somebody like Scotty, I had to tape my stuff down because, I wasn't back by the amp. I was out there with him and I didn't want him tripping on my stuff. So I had to tape everything down. And I'd be like, no, I got to get the duct tape out. I got to put the pedals together, the pedal board. I got to do this. I got to do that. So they were always be like, aren't you done yet?
Yeah, it's great bunch of guys, great
Yeah.
band, good friends, and it's been really nice talking to the people from EF I have so far. There
Yeah.
will be others.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
there's going to be a few more interviews.
Well, there's a lot of people, a lot more people through that band than AOD. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Probably within a single year sometime.
Whoever they call somebody and they say, yeah, I can go play those 3 shows wherever it is. That's
Yep,
the new person. Then
yep,
they come
exactly.
back and they're like, I don't know about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was filling in for Rob when he couldn't make
Right,
stuff. That's how
right.
that happened. I think maybe John, it's all blur, it's
Everybody's been back and forth. I did like 4 shows in Texas with Mike on drums,
Mhm.
and Sal's like, hey, you want to come play 4 shows in Texas? I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, sure, why not? You know,
Yeah.
and they know that I know all the material. I probably could get up there with no rehearsal if I wanted to. Not that I would want to, but I probably could.
Yeah. Dan asked me to play on the next record, do like a little
Oh,
guest.
cool.
So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know what it's going to be. It's probably going to be written in the studio and put out the following week, but we'll have to see how it goes. I'm sure the record's already pressed somehow. I'm not quite sure how.
Sal thought about it, so it's already pressed.
Well,
His thoughts are pressed. I
right.
find I'm joking.
Well, there's going to be the US version, the Australian version, the 10-inch
Yes,
version. Yeah.
yes, of course.
I recorded 2 songs with them. You wouldn't believe how many times those songs have popped up in places.
I believe it. I believe it. I have now seen repackages of, I don't know how many versions of there are Listen Up Baby now. 3, 4. Then there's new versions of Listen Up Baby, uh, which I'm like, new versions? Oh, well, okay.
It's nuts, but I love it.
Yeah.
Love Jim, it's been a real pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on.
Sure, no problem. Good
And
talking to you.
yeah, likewise. I'll be seeing you in a few days' time.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's coming. It's coming up quick. We'll be I think the insert to that Misfits Horror Business record, we'll be rehearsing at an undisclosed location. You know, maybe there'll be some ghosts there. I don't know. Like Dave Street wrote in that
Yeah,
in those liner notes of Horror Business.
yeah. And rest in peace, Dave Street. Great guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Great guy. But yeah, we'll definitely reconnect in
Okay.
Connecticut. Looking forward to it.
I'll look forward to seeing you.
Right on, man. Until
Okay.
then,
Talk to you
take
later.
care.
Have a good night. Bye.
You too.